Yeah, it's gonna pop up like crow-kata 999. Like it's just gonna be some an evil spirit is calling. Hello, and welcome to Saving People, Queering Things, the podcast where we talk about ghosts, road trips, and free will through every episode of the retro TV series Supernatural.
Today, we are exploring Season 3, Episode 14, Long Distance Call, through the theme of glory. I'm Abigail, and with me today is my co-host Elayna, whose voice you just heard, and our wonderful guest host Jessy, who was on our episode on Playthings back in Season 2 and is back. Jessy, do you want to introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about you?
Welcome.
Hello, my name is Jessy. I am on TikTok as .tired.gay, pronouns she, they. I have been back in the Supernatural fandom pretty much since the confession scene when I got roped back in via TikTok, and have been kind of re-experiencing the show for the first time since I was in high school, and now I'm thoroughly ingrained. So
A tale as old as November 2020.
It's a very familiar story. Your experience is basically exactly my experience, Jessy.
I unfortunately stayed involved the whole time because I hate myself, I guess.
Oh no.
No, I did. All honesty, I did very intermittently watch throughout 13 and 14. But as soon as I knew the last season was starting, that's when I was like, okay. I was like, I can't miss the end of this lovely shit show.
I remember hearing it in the wind. Oh, Supernatural's going to be ending. I was like, oh, remember that time in my life when I was obsessed? And then I didn't think about Supernatural again very much. And then 1518 happened and my best friend called me and was like, it's canon. And now I'm back.
I remember hearing that this show was on its last season and feeling like profound relief. Even though I had no other connection to it, I was like, oh, finally someone puts it down.
Yeah.
And then of course hearing about 1518 and, the world imploding upon itself. So
yeah, I saw a thing just the other day. I mean no ill intent towards any British listeners we may have, but somebody made a post.
We do have British listeners. I do know that.
Yes, and we love you all, and we wish you solidarity in your time of trouble. However, this is one little thing to maybe make you giggle. They're just like, so is John Locke going to go canon now that Boris is out, or is that just an American thing?
I did see that tweet.
And I was like, oh boy.
You're due for your own recompense. This is This is what you get when your government falls apart.
Yeah, the Destiel Putin election, British invasion. But speaking of all of this craziness that has led us to where we are, it is time for our road so far and our recap. For today's season recap, Abigail is going to be doing that and catching us up on where we are. So, my friend, are you ready?
Definitely. Yes.
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so Dean is going to hell, but Sam is trying really, really hard to find any way to stop him. But that turns out to be really, really difficult. According to Ruby, this demon that Sam is friends with, enemies with, frenemies with, we don't really know. But she says Dean can't be saved. Gordon is turned into a vampire and dies. There is a girl named Bella who has stole the cult. Sam experiences 6 months where Dean is dead, and he's really mentally not well, and they don't have long left.
Yep, that's about it.
There were probably other important things.
I really need to rewatch season 3.
Actually, you did cover, I think, pretty much, you at least touched on every base.
Okay. Yeah, I was like Gordon, Bella, Ruby.
Yeah, those are kind of the three
mystery spot.
Yeah, mystery spot. But yeah, that was wonderful. And now Jessy is going to do our episode recap. If you're ready.
Oh God. Okay.
Trust me, there's no way to do this wrong. We've literally had an episode where the guest hosts were just like, no, we're not going to.
No, but they did do it. They did do it. It was bedtime stories, and they did do it, but the way they ended up doing it was they traded words back and forth.
So like he goes to a
without planning it all.
Oh my God.
It
was beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was a recap.
There's no wrong way to do this, is what we're saying.
Okay.
All right. So I'll count you in. 3, 2, 1, go.
So we open in Ohio, where a man keeps getting a phone call from a weird phone number that is a woman's voice urging him to join her, and he ends up offing himself. And then we find the Winchesters in, I'm taking way too long to do this. We find them in a university. They go to take the case. It's a crocata. John calls. God damn.
You got to John, which honestly
got to John.
The only important thing
Which
about this
I gotta
episode.
say, it's so funny to me how much John discourse has been going around, and now we have literally an episode we're about to have.
Ready. I am
I
ready.
know you are.
I am so
I feel
ready.
like you've like cracked every knuckle, and I'm just like, ah.
I have spent all week on various social media platforms being like, yes, John was an abusive asshole. Anyway, it's fine.
But when you asked me which episode I wanted to do, and I was like, this one, because it's in Ohio, and I live in Ohio, and the getting to hate John in this episode is really just like the gift that keeps on giving. So
yes,
I found as I watched it that my brain was grossly like crisscrossing episodes, and there was a lot of things that happened in this episode that for some reason, like I thought Long Distance Call was episode 315.
Oh, you thought it was next week.
I thought we were, going to be watching the one with the guy with the slice and dice stuff, and then I was like, oh no, this is phone calls. It's in the title. It should have been obvious, but here we are.
This is the long set of episodes towards the finale where we have several episodes in a row that we're finally back on like the main plot line.
Yep. It's all coming to a head.
Speaking of which, it's now time to move into this week's theme discussion. And today we looked at this episode through the theme of glory. And I think we might need to start with a definition today. And I think Elayna has one for us.
I do. I'm happy to provide. So when I was looking up the definition of glory, there were 3 different ones. And I felt like all of them they each contributed a little different kind of spice. And so I thought I'd share all 3 of them. So glory can be defined as either high renown or honor won by notable achievements, magnificence or great beauty, and taking great pride or pleasure in, which I thought this was going to be a really interesting episode to discuss this through, because it's not like a lot of times we will go with a very on the nose sort of theme that like clearly describes the themes in it. But then every so often we get one of these that's like a little more abstract. So we're going to have to like reach into our psyches to pull out some cool discussion points today. And I think it's going to go well.
Yeah. Where do we want to start with this?
I had this one point written down where I feel like Dean thinks that his dad's solution, his, dad in hand quotes, because it's obviously not John, it's the monster. He thinks that his dad's solution is a glorious one, like, and he's you can tell in that scene with like him and Sam that he's like, this is the answer to all of our problems and you're just ignoring it, like this is a glorious gift we've been given here and you're just pretending like it's not there. But I think it comes down to like Sam's skepticism into why they don't actually like go through with that. But I think that was kind of like one moment that I specifically noticed was like had glory energy, if you will.
That's interesting.
I know that's very vague, but
No, I think that's actually interesting because that like a lot of John's persona in the first season, like he's on this revenge mission, but there's also this sense of like the glory of the hunt and the like purpose in there because I think there's some like ties from glory and like a sense of purpose. And I wonder if that's part of why Dean believes that it's John for so long in this episode, because it fits that kind of narrative, that glorious narrative of we win by taking out the bad guy. And that the idea that they could take out the demon, even though that's been this whole season very far out of reach. And, we saw the demon, like we know that Lilith is incredibly powerful and they know that. So the idea that they would be able to win, I think is feels very glorious to them, or to Dean particularly.
I don't know if they know she holds the contract, but they know she is a villain coming after them. I'm so sorry, but I was just thinking about that and I was like, wait a minute. Like we do know she exists and that she's after them, but I don't know if they know she holds the contract.
Right.
Because one thing that I did notice in this episode that like I wrote it down as like a weird thing because I kind of forgot how this episode ended. But when when Dean is talking about how John called him, he's like, he knows where the demon is, and he's like describing the demon, like they think the demon's a guy. So I don't think that they know that it's Lilith yet. I think they find that out towards the end of the next episode.
Well, so I think it's interesting that you bring up the discussion about John's sort of solution to things and the way that John approaches problems, especially the season 1 John that obviously Dean looks up to a lot. Because when I think of glory, I think of something really like romantic, like romanticized.
Yeah.
It's not a real way that things happen. You don't get to, I also kept thinking of like blaze of glory, like going down in a blaze of glory. And that's like not, I mean, yeah, stuff can happen that way, but I think what's kind of interesting about the progression of Dean throughout this season is like he keeps trying to grasp onto these ideas of like, you know, like, oh, the little happy things in life that I've always wanted and everything like that, while like facing down the barrel of this really undignified way to go. That's not glorified.
And he literally uses that phrase this episode, that he's staring down the barrel. Like he's really scared, and there's not much glory in what's waiting for him.
Yeah.
Or in admitting it, you know, the idea of, I think a lot of the ideas of glory end up getting really tied to like military and soldier like ideology. And we've seen that with Sam and Dean and John and the way that he raised them. And there's no glory in admitting you're scared.
Yeah.
And Dean, I think, falls into that trap even in this episode where like his first response when Sam questions whether or not it's John, questions if it's legitimate. And Sam's pretty gentle about the fact, like, about the way he questions it. He's not like an asshole about it. He's just like, I don't know. And like, let's not be reckless when we don't know.
Yeah.
But Dean's reaction is to like just get angry because that's a lot safer than admitting, you know, the fear that's there.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like obviously he's reverting back to being like a kid in the relationship that he has to John in this moment.
Yeah.
Literally waiting for a call.
Yeah, like it's in the same way that if you're really scared and you see the person that you like you see your hero walk into the room and you're like, okay, things are going the way I expect them to go now. I can feel safe again.
Yeah, I think especially after John manages to like come in clutch with that little Deus Ex Machina at the end of season 2, like he thinks that somehow, I think he thinks that there's a part of him that's very deep that thinks somehow his dad is going to save him, because so far his dad has saved him. I mean, in a questionable manner, but he's managed to save his son. And he did it once at the beginning of season 2, and he does it again. Like season 2 is kind of bookended by John doing something that saves Dean. And so I think that as he's going into this very inglorious sort of death that's looming over him, he thinks like, of course my dad's gonna like, you know, drive in his monster truck and fucking save the day. And I think he's really at the end of the episode when he realizes that that's not what's gonna happen. I think it's almost like this episode feels like the last shred of hope that Dean has being crushed a little.
He kind of says that
really kind of heartbreaking. Yeah.
He says at the end that like he is really scared because it feels like they've run out of every option they've looked at. Even the fact that they take this case in the first place is Dean being like, fuck it. Like we don't, there's not much else we can do.
He says is like, hope doesn't get you jack squat.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the idea of glory and kind of connected to John, another thing I noticed was when Dean blows up at Sam, because he really wants to have this hope in John, it's immediately to what Jesse said about them immediately reverting back to like their childhood patterns, like they both revert back in a little bit in that scene where Dean goes, yep, I'm going to do exactly what dad said. And Sam goes, A, dad's information is not usually always reliable. B, we don't even know this is dad. And so Dean's like cycling to blaming Sam's hesitance on the fact that it's John, going like, I can't believe you're doing this again.
Yeah.
Like he's been dead for like 2 years and you're still, the instant he's back, you're still already instantly ready to jump into a fight with him. And I was thinking about like their history just kind of coming back to bite them, and how that's kind of illustrative of the fact that there's not a lot of like, even though John has saved them multiple times, there's not a lot of glory in his legacy, at least in the way that he's passed on, the things he has actually passed on to his sons. So much of their actual skill and integrity has come from other people in their lives, hasn't come from John.
Yeah.
John's impact is not a glorious one, even despite like him saving them.
Well, I don't know. This might be kind of like a little bit out there of a reference, but I know for me, when I was thinking about this theme of glory, when I think of glory, one of the very first quotes from like another piece of media that comes to mind is in Lord of the Rings at the end in Two Towers, where there's this moment where it seems like all hope is lost. And they're deciding, like, are we going to ride out and like face this bad thing that is about to possibly destroy us all? And the king character says, for death and glory. And then the other character, who's like the hero, quote unquote, he just goes, no, for your people. And I feel like death and glory is what I think of with John, because he was this character who was just so bent on this revenge and the task, as opposed to his sons and how it was going to affect them, his whole quest for glory and revenge and killing this demon. And so, like, I think that's where a lot of Sam's hesitancy comes from, because he's worried about Dean, specifically the person that Dean is and the fate of his soul. And so that's like something that he's fighting for. And I think it's why he's skeptical to believe that John could be back, because he's so worried about his brother, whereas John was always worried about the demon.
Yeah, Sam doesn't have a lot of good track records to believe that John will prioritize Dean.
Exactly.
Well, and I think that, like, on the conversation of like what legacy they're leaving, like John's legacy is obviously, it's viewed differently by either of them. And I think that we can also see that reflected in how they're reacting to the fact that Dean is going to die. Like Dean, well, let's say Sam, he is not accepting this at all. And Dean is focused on his legacy. He's like this thing that he's like thought his whole life of, oh, well, I'm going to go down swinging, like everything like that. Like it's like he's still telling this story in his head of how it's supposed to go, how his life is supposed to run, versus Sam, who is like, that's not even a concern. That's his brother.
Yeah. He's focused on the fact that he already knows, because of what happened in Mystery Spot, he knows a bit of what it feels like to lose Dean, and all he wants to do is focus on how can I save him. And it makes me think back to over the whole season, the fact that Dean has been like recklessly running into cases like all season, almost I think there's a little bit of the like, I'm seeking a glorious end, even if it's actually before my deal comes due.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the ending that's coming for him, if they don't get out of the contract, is not a glorious one. But dying on a hunt, that's like, we've seen multiple hunters talk about that as sort of the way to go. Like, it's gonna end bloody, but that's like sort of a badge of honor. Like, and Dean even said that thing about like in Faith, Dean was frustrated. I think one of the reasons he's frustrated is in that episode is even though he's going to die from something that happened on a hunt, he's not dying strictly because of the hunt in that episode. And it's not a glorious death. And he's got this idea in his head, I think from John and from other hunters, that the only way to die as a hunter has to be a certain way. And that then that's how you leave your legacy. And that's just like not the case.
Well, I think that something that is interesting is if you can compare the conversation that they have at the end of the episode, where Dean says, the only person who can get me out of this is me, and Sam goes, and me, to what our monster of the week, the Crocata, is saying to them, where he says, I think I wrote it down somewhere, but basically just that the people being distant from each other, the lack of community is what makes them easier to attack.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And the thing about hunter culture, or at the very least, John Winchester's toxic masculine hunter culture, is that it is inherently isolating. The idea, and as well as like wrapped up in this idea of like what a hunter should be. You should be like strong and individual and rely on no one and nothing and trust no one and nothing.
And make black and white decisions immediately.
Yeah, and here we've got Dean, who is, stripped of all possible hopes and out, and he's finally like, the romanticism of it is gone. He can't rely on this idea of what a hunter should be that you know, the glorious, like, guns ablazing hunter, he can't rely on that anymore. He has to rely on other people and admit vulnerability. And I think, I don't know, that's where my tirade ends.
That's so good.
That was awesome.
That's so good. And I like love that you drew that, because I was trying to figure out with that whole speech that Kokata has where the connection was. And I think that's true. Like, we see the times that we've had the most hope for Dean in this season has been in the collaboration between Sam and Bobby. And like, we know that they are working behind the scenes to try and find a solution. Even like when they've connected, even when they've worked with Bella, you know, there's the sense of like shared knowledge and shared context is powerful. And, you know, Ellen, we see that with Ellen and Joe in season 2, like Sam and Dean are already so reliant on these people. And as much as John going in guns a-blazing has sometimes saved them, it's also sometimes really screwed them over. And
well, the one point this came to me as both of you were just sharing those really awesome theories. But one thing that's really interesting about this episode is that we talk so much on this show, like literally every season finale that we discuss on Saving People Queering Things is through the lens of, like, you know, free will and family. Like, we talk about those two things at the beginning and ends of our seasons. And I think that free will kind of comes in a really interesting way here, because for once, like, Dean is usually the person who's like, screw destiny, I don't care, we're going to do it our way. But in this episode in particular, you kind of have Dean really fixating on this like idea of destiny, and Sam is kind of the voice of free will in the situation, where like Sam is like, we can figure out a way to get out of this, and Dean is just kind of like leaning on these old ideas of John's and is kind of falling back into that like soldier sort of mindset of like, this is, you know, we have to do this, we have to go out guns blazing because this is what we're meant to do. And it's really interesting to watch an episode where Dean is kind of having that mindset, because I feel like Dean is usually like the major voice of free will, and amongst, at least between the two of them. And I just think that that's like kind of something really interesting that I noticed as you were both sharing that.
That's cool. I wonder too if it's also an indicator of the fact that Sam is a little more comfortable in who he is in this season. I think there's still a lot of unknowns for him in terms of what impact the demon blood will have, is, you know, why Lilith is after him, all those things. But at the same time, he's had such a focus this season because of Dean Steele that everything else has fallen to the wayside, like you said, Jesse. And I wonder if that's part of what's giving him the confidence to kind of go, no, like, screw destiny. Like, he, you know, Sam's not usually like that when it comes to his own destiny.
Yeah.
When it comes to someone telling him about himself, he struggles a lot more to throw that off. But when it comes to Dean, he is a lot more willing. And I think maybe Dean's the same a little bit. You know, it was a lot easier for him to be like, screw destiny when it was about Sam becoming evil. It's a lot harder when it's about a choice that was free will that he made. You know, like, in some reasons, the reason he is in this situation where he feels like there's no options is because he made a choice at the end of season 2.
Free will.
And so I think he somewhat feels like he's made his bed, he has to lie in it, you know, at the same time as he's desperately scared of it.
Well, that's part of why I like this season so much, is because it's such a role reversal for them. Like, I feel like Sam fighting so hard to save Dean is like the opposite of where they usually stand. Or at the very least, it feels like Sam trying to pay Dean back for all of the stuff that he did for him in the past, or at least finally starting to come to terms with the fact that, like, I don't want to say that he owes him a debt, because I don't know if that's really how I feel about it, but being like, no, you've got a problem now. It's my turn to take care of you.
Yeah.
I love that this season.
The idea of a sibling, I feel like this is such a sibling thing too. Like, to do that transition, like, as you become an adult, like, I've had to do this with my siblings, and sometimes I struggle with it as well, in the same ways that Dean struggles with it, of if you spend a lot of your life like looking out for younger siblings, and then you get to a point where you don't need to anymore, or when you need help and they can provide it, it's really hard to accept that help, but it's also like this empowering opportunity for them to be able to offer that help and to say, hey, like, we care for, like, not just like you care for me, but like we care for each other. And I think making that transition is hard in ideal circumstances. And then for Sam and Dean, obviously not ideal circumstances. And I also really like that opportunity Sam gets.
I think it's also cool what you said, because that's really like Sam kind of declares that almost as like this, like he kind of tells you what the plot of season 3 is going to be in the season 2 finale when he has that like, guess I have to save you for a change. Like so much contained in that one line. Like he's literally telling us what the entire trajectory of the season we're currently in will look like, because we really, so far, we haven't had that. It's been so much about like season 1 is really him bringing Sam back into the fold. And then season 2 is fearing that bringing him back into the fold is going to be the thing that destroys him. And so this season is really, I think, the first season where we get a major focus on Dean. Like, I feel like Sam kind of, if you watch the first 2 seasons, it feels to me like Sam is the main character. But once you get to season 3, it feels like there's a shift. And we're like, oh, we're going to get seasons where Dean is the character that is the main focus.
Yeah, or at least the main focus of the plot, the main story arc.
Which is why it was weird when, because he's getting so much more characterization in this season, when I went to watch this episode and he was still like making weird sexist jokes and stuff where I was like, oh, but you've got dimension now.
Yeah, like could you just not? Maybe
we improved some things, and then other things you just are still there.
Well, I thought it was because it also, they seemed a little half-hearted too. It seemed, I doubt that this was intentional. Maybe on Jensen's part.
It was a jacking choice.
Yeah, but it seemed like when he makes the Busty Asian Beauties joke, it like feels a little bit like he's playing a part.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
I think that season 3 Dean, like in a nutshell, is like from the first scene we see him in, he's playing a part, both I think to the audience, like, and to like Sam and Bobby, but also to himself.
Yeah.
Of, if I pretend that I just actually don't care that I know the way I'm going to die, then maybe eventually I'll stop caring. Maybe eventually it like won't matter to me. And so, yeah, a lot of the things is like keeping up this persona, because this is the first real season where we've seen him afraid for himself.
Yeah. And what an interesting dynamic that is, to be so worried about yourself that you're like completely removing yourself from yourself. It's just a really weird dynamic.
Well, and I think like, so we have the idea of him sacrificing his life to save Sam's life, but we have it drawn out over this whole season. So it's not, I mean, on the subject of glory, dying for somebody else feels very glorious. Dying for somebody else over the course of a year, rough. That's rough.
Yeah, because you still have all the messy things of they still are like living together and pissing each other off and creating new conflicts and having new nuances to their relationship. And he actually has to deal with the emotional consequences for Sam, where Sam is like, you know, I think in sacrifice stories, the person sacrificed for doesn't ever get to confront the person that made the sacrifice. And Sam gets to confront Dean a bunch of times and say, hey, like, I wasn't okay. I didn't want you to do this. I'm not sure that I'm okay with the fact that you did this. Did you think about me and what I would lose in losing you? And yeah, it's not glorious at all. It's very, very messy.
So now that we've had this awesome discussion about how glory ties into this episode, we are going to phase into our Going Meta segment. And this is where we are tracking lore, the Bechdel test, pop culture, and more. So let us begin with the good old Bechdel test. Do we pass? Womp, womp, womp.
You don't even need to say it. We'll just keep the Jessy laughing.
Yep.
That's it.
It would be nice, but maybe next time. Don't even think,
No, I don't think next time. I'm pretty sure it won't next time.
Oh yeah, it won't next time. Not at all, but maybe sometime.
There's like one woman with lines.
And actually, now that I think about it, the only named woman is the dead one at the beginning of the episode, Linda.
Oh, the girl is named.
Is she?
Yeah, the kid, yeah. Because Sam calls her by her name when he tells Dean he's going to see her.
Okay. So we do have 2 named women.
One of them is dead. But the thing is, one of them is dead in just an impersonation by a male monster.
Yeah, named Clark. No. So thanks, Clark, for all that.
So get this, I was looking into the lore. There's a bunch of it in this episode. And some of it kind of crosses over with pop culture. So we'll kind of do lore and lost canon and pop culture a little bit fluidly today.
Yeah. Well, I know, Jesse, you said you had some really fun notes about historical accuracy. So I, for one, am really curious to hear what those are. Because the whole time I was watching, I was like, was there a spirit phone? Is any of this true?
Okay, so one, I work in a museum. Their quips about the annoying docent, rude. Just as a side note.
And we're walking.
Honestly,
don't touch that.
I've never been on a museum tour even remotely like that.
Never in my life.
No. So Thomas Edison did theoretically make a spirit phone. Thomas Edison is from Milan, Ohio. There's not a prototype that exists. There's not a museum in Milan where they have a spirit phone. That'd be super neat. That does not exist.
Oh, that sucks, actually.
That's a bit of a bummer.
I'm probably going to have like somebody in my comments later being like, yeah, I saw it. I guess I've never been, so maybe there is, but
if you have information.
Yeah, as far as I know,
please prove us wrong.
Yeah.
Pics or it didn't happen.
Somebody did write something. I Googled all of this. Somebody did write something at some point, one of Edison's contemporaries, to say that they did, in fact, sit down with his spirit phone or something, but not one exists now.
It's very loose. Which it kind of makes sense in the context of the episode, honestly, because they determine also that it's kind of not a legitimate, really, avenue of investigation.
I thought it was silly they brought it up.
Yeah. It's a little bit. They were like, we need a miss. We need a misdirect.
It was a classic supernatural misdirect where it's like, oh yes, we have figured out the thing, but there are still 20 minutes left of the episode. Guess it's not really that thing.
So it's going to be a silly thing.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my second point. That type of phone number that's not how phone numbers looked. Not even 100 years ago.
Really?
I did so much extensive Googling because I looked through so many historical records that involve phone numbers. And I was like, that's weird. I've never seen 3 letters, 2 numbers, maybe 3 letters, 4 numbers, but it's mainly two letters and 4 or 5 numbers. Like that's pretty standard.
Okay.
And when he said that it was old, like almost 100 years old or whatever, I looked around in that and no, that is simply not how it is. The SHA should refer to a location. So like it should have been like MI for Milan or for the nearest road or something like that. And I was trying to see if SHA was like maybe like well, it wasn't Kripke who wrote this, but like if the show was trying to reference something like 33, those are what angel numbers or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
But nothing. I have no idea. I looked at a map of Ohio for so long. I'm like, this is nothing. They just like were like, this looks right.
Like a random collection of letters so that it'll be recognizable when we show it 7 times in the episode. But
yeah,
not actually. That's actually strange because they usually, when they have things like that, it is a hidden reference. It's a reference to a band or a producer or something.
Curious, because I think Carver wrote this one.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy
Carver.
Carver.
I really wrote this one.
Maybe it is a reference to something. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly not one that I found out. And I just know that they didn't start adding letters into the phone numbers until after like 1910. And then it was only 1 or 2.
Jesse, I have no idea how old you are. So this is an interesting thing. So you may be in the same category with me here. I am old enough to say I remember when phone numbers were 7 numbers. I was like 6 when they added area codes, but still.
I think because I think Jesse, you and I are similar in age.
Yeah, I'm 26.
Okay. Yeah, I'm 20.
Right,
yes,
yep.
Yeah.
I'm 31. Okay. So like literally, I just caught that. I remember when my mom was like, there's going to be 3 more numbers on our phone number now. And I was like, okay, I don't care. I'm going to go play now.
I was a little bit too young. Like by the time I was learning my phone number, because I would have been like 2, 2 or 3, like 3 when that happened. So by the time I was learning my phone number at 4 or 5.
Well, you used to only need them for long distance. And now they're
also, I don't know what it was like here in Canada. So I
was going to say, I don't
know. I don't know.
Yeah, but
it's
just a fun
disappointing.
factoid.
It's disappointing. I also realized a second ago that I said Carver Edlund wrote this episode, and then I went, that's not true.
Listen, I
That's
heard
not
that, but I was
true.
like,
I need to say something about this about this little like place that my brain went, so that I don't get someone coming later and mocking me for it. So I'm going to mock myself right now. I know Carver Edlund didn't write this episode, but in another sense, if you know, you know. I mean,
yeah. Did
anyway.
Carver Edlund technically write? Oh, never mind. Anyway,
Spoilers.
We'll get there, kids. We'll get there.
Yeah, no, is it just Carver that wrote it?
Yeah, Jeremy Carver was the writer of this episode. Although on the note of like, this is kind of a pop culture-y thing, but as we're talking about like being old and phone numbers, that messenger app made me feel like I was 900,000 years old. I looked at that and I was like, is she on AIM right now? And it just made me feel ancient.
I couldn't tell, and I didn't look that closely to figure out if it was an actual messenger app or if it was something that actually
never is. It's always like,
I think it's just a fake one.
Yeah,
sort of
but
generic.
It was supposed to be AIM. I could tell you that much because it looked exactly
the
like
look of
AIM. And me and my away messages felt very old when I saw it because that was just unacceptable conditions.
Do you think when the ghost left, it made a little door shutting noise?
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, hopefully.
I can only hope that when the ghost mom logged in, it was like bloop, with that little water drop noise. It's my favorite. I love the water drop noise. I miss it. Bring back the water droplet noise for phones.
Simpler day, a simpler way of messaging.
Yeah.
Your dead parents.
Yeah. I just want to go back to the girl days. No, that was terrible. Anyway.
Again, we are getting another, in terms of lore, we're getting another monster that swallows souls. We've had a couple of these.
Yeah.
But this is a different monster, obviously, in its origins, which might be a good lead in to talk a little bit about its origins.
Yeah, I feel compelled to share with listeners that our document says, yikes, okay, we got to talk about the origins of Crocata. I don't know who wrote that in there, but I am very curious about what
that was me. I didn't have a chance to do a lot of research onto Crocata.
I don't think that Carver did either.
Well, and the unfortunate thing is I saw a quote from Kripke. I believe it was Kripke. It may have been Carver. It was one of the two of them talking about this episode and how proud they were of like being accurate, which is just not true. They were like, apparently, I know what it was. Kripke, like they were like, we need the monster to do this specific thing. And then they worked backwards to be like, so they fudged some things and they were like, we were happy that we were able to find a monster that could do this specific thing. So the Crocata is a mythical dog wolf from India or Ethiopia, connected to the ideas of like hyenas, like that's sort of the origins of it. And so when you think about like hyenas and like sounding like humans screaming or crying or calling out, that's sort of where some of that kind of originates. But so not
a creepy white man named Clark is what I'm gathering.
And I think the thing I was really uncomfortable with, and obviously, like I say this as a white person. So I think the fact that this has South Asian and African roots and the placement of like the misdirect of the IT guy being a person of color, that was the thing that stood out to me as soon as I looked, because I was like, oh, that misdirect is a big uncomfortable thing. I'm like, no.
Especially when that guy's characterization was awful.
That too, because I'm like, it's a racist, awful characterization in general. And then if you're also drawing any sort of line to the origins of this monster that they're also kind of fudging the information about, even within the episode, they don't talk about the origins of the Crocata. They very vaguely, they mostly just are like, it calls people and now it does it with the phone, and it's they don't do any work to like establish and like Supernatural has a really mixed bag in terms of its lore, like monsters coming from different origins and how accurate they pull from lore. but it just feels lazy. It feels like they needed a monster to be able to call. I'm like, honestly, you could have made up a monster that could have done that. And I know Kripke really likes to pull from actual
but that's the thing.
things.
You only get to pull from actual things if you're going to actually pull from that thing and do it justice. You don't get to just be like, this sounds neat. I'm going to
take its name and vague ideas about it.
Yeah, just take the, like, literally the vaguest stereotypical elements of this culture and plop them into a white person. Like the fact that a djinn is like the djinn in season 2, cringe beyond belief when you actually know what the origins of djinn are, how sacred djinn are to people that believe in them. It's a mess. And Kripke, God, I have so many words I'd like to have with that man and his team, and that's where I'll leave that.
Well, because I told you guys earlier that I read this article about this episode that pointed out all of these weird plot holes and inconsistencies, and that I was trying to separate it from my own thoughts. But it pointed out this specific thing about the crocata, and I wish I remembered the name of this article that I looked at. But
if you find it, let us know, and we'll stick it in the episode notes. If anyone else knows of it, let us know.
Cool.
Yeah.
But it basically said that, like, this evolution for the crocata doesn't make a huge amount of sense, like it using the phone, because how does he get their energy through the phone this way? They don't explain it.
No, you just watch it. Well, and you watch him. It doesn't make sense because he apparently gets the energy from the souls. And so you see him suck the guy's soul and you're like, that makes sense. He sucked his soul. But then he goes over to the phone lines and like puts his hand on it and is like, I'm getting energy. I'm like, which one is it? Which one is it?
Yeah.
Because if you just need to get it by talking on the phone, then like, why are you taking people's actual souls? But if you need to take people's souls, then how are you getting, is it like snacking if you take it through the phone and then it's a full meal if you get their soul? I don't know.
And then how do you get Wi-Fi through that? I just don't understand.
And I feel like it's also less work to just do what you've always done.
Yeah.
Well, and some of the same reasons that it would be easier to lure people over the phone are the same reasons it would just be easier to lure people in general now. Back alleys exist, and I don't know.
And also, they don't really address how the crocata knows things about these people in order to use that against them. Like, how does the crocata know a real exorcism? That's the one thing that really bugged me, is that when they're talking about it, they're like, yeah, Bobby says it is a real exorcism.
So it must have been an exorcism John actually knew.
Yeah.
Or someone wrote down somewhere.
It's just like, why does this crocata know an ancient exorcism that he knows to feed to Dean from John? It's just all very convoluted.
Well, he says that whole line about, you'd be surprised of how much of yourself is just floating out there waiting to be plucked. But that's like nonsensical.
Yeah.
Like, I know the internet is forever. We all know the internet is forever, but this also was 2007.
Yeah.
And John did not seem well versed in advanced technology.
That John was like, posting in an AOL chat room about the exorcisms that he knew.
No, he wasn't even telling his fucking sons basic information.
Amen.
Well, and what I thought was weird is, like, I feel like you can really see how this episode came together, especially with that information about Kripke being like, we're so glad that we were able to make it all come together. We had this idea. Like, obviously they heard about the spirit phone and then created a story around that.
The urban myth, probably, that kind of whole idea.
So why wouldn't you go with a spirit? It's in
with the spirit phone.
Honestly, that's less goofy, not appropriative, and
would probably have less plot holes.
On brand for Supernatural also. It's also very on brand for Supernatural to take something that's an urban myth, an urban legend, and then be like, this is the part of it that's true. Or this is the twist on how it's true. Like, you could still have a twist in there. You could still have a misdirect and a twist.
Yeah.
But it would have...
If it could be less racist, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But apparently we're asking too much of these people.
That's the trend.
On the note of the crocata being like, well, it's easier now to use the phones. It's about to get harder, buddy, because, we have caller ID now and nobody is answering the phone if they don't know who it is. So
yep. Yeah, it's gonna pop up like crow-kata 999. Like, it's just gonna be something. It's gonna be like, an evil spirit is calling.
Oh, this makes me feel really nervous because I always pick up the phone. I've got anxiety about like missing a call.
Oh no,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
So I'm gone, guys. I'm out. It'd get me.
Oh no.
I'd be like, I don't know anybody named Shaw 33.
I did so much Googling of Shaw 33 just trying to figure out if it was anything. And there's a Twitter account. I feel like I shouldn't plug this. It seemed insane. But there was a Twitter account that I think was clearly created because of this episode, but in 2011? I don't know.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
That Twitter account's about to get some traffic.
You're welcome.
The first hit is going to be
We're
from
sorry,
me.
user of the Twitter account Shaw33 from 2011. You're probably not into Supernatural anymore. No, you went with a really niche reference, so maybe you are.
Somebody hyperfixating somewhere.
That's funny.
They do use aliases in this episode.
Right.
They use Raimi and Campbell, which is referring to Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell. Sam Raimi directed The Evil Dead. Bruce Campbell starred in it. And as a fun fact, Bruce Campbell was one of Kripke's first picks to play John Winchester.
Fascinating.
Oh, that's cool. That's fun.
Yeah. So that's my other little nugget.
Well, I mean,
Nice.
this may be known, and either of you and or listeners that hear this may be able to point this out. I wonder if that's why he went with Campbell for Mary's last name,
Oh,
as
Possible.
like a little nod to that.
interesting.
Be an interesting longer term.
Yeah, Kripke likes to play the long game with his weird references.
My contribution to Lost Cannon Jar is, I mean, it's still kind of related to crocatas. Is my question is, where did they originally learn about crocatas? Because they just are kind of like, all of a sudden Sam's like, oh, that's what it is. Like, it's an episode with no research other than into the
Zero
spirit
research.
phone. Like, they research the spirit phone, then they're like, nah, this is a dud. And then I think they just run out of time. And Sam's like, I just magically remember in the perfect moment. And then Dean also seems to have just
He's
figured
like,
it out.
oh, darn it, it's one of those.
And so I just want to, I don't have John's journal. So I might reach out to KJ from Supernatural Opinions and ask her if they've seen anything in John's journal about crocatas.
I feel like KJ knows all.
Yeah, if we have any earlier indicators of crocatas, or if you're listening and you have a theory on why they would know about crocatas and why would it be so forefront in their memory that they would instantly be able to pull up that information. But if not, which I feel like there might not be, this is a bit of a lost canon, also something we don't see again. This monster is a one-off, despite it being a very interesting concept where like the dead are calling, you know.
Well, not to harp on it again, but also like, what are they doing there? I feel like they usually explain when like mythical creatures are not in their home domain, and they just don't.
That's true.
There is a lot of assumption that the Winchesters know what's going on, and we're just like, okay, without explaining it, and it's very strange.
Yeah,
Par for the course.
this episode's very holy in that regard.
With an E.
So the last section in our going meta is our gaydar section, where we talk about sexuality, gender, relationship dynamics. There's not a lot in this episode. I don't know what we really have to say about it. Do either of you have anything particular you'd like to say on this topic? It's not really there's not really any opportunity for it in this episode.
Aside from the continued use of the gross, busty Asian beauties reference.
Yeah, which can go right in the trash where it belongs.
Yeah.
The only thing I could really think of was sort of a continuation of the theme discussion, which is just that I think Dean's ideas of glory and going out in a blaze of glory are very tied into his ideas of masculinity. And then I think then you can reflect that back on Sam, who doesn't seem to give a shit about that.
Yeah.
Right. Sam can be skeptical of this solution because in part because he doesn't have the same hangups that Dean has around what glory is.
My brain just wanted to say, yes, Sam, he, they, Winchester.
Yes, no, I was going to say that. They say Winchester rights.
Yes.
We believe in that at this show.
Yes.
And this is just a throwaway. I have nothing more to say other than this sentence, but why, when Dean in that moment at the beginning of the episode, he's like, oh, you guys were talking to Case? He's like, no, we were talking about our favorite boy bands. Like, Dean, why is that what you went to? Like, you could have picked anything.
The Dean knows current pop culture and not just bands from the 70s is the theory that it's well established really early is just getting stronger. There was a Timberlake reference last season from Dean. Boy bands are That boy knows more music than he lets on.
It's okay, Dean. Just let it go, like Elsa. If you know, you know.
I guess there was that moment where Sam and Dean are at odds, and Sam says that he's going to go talk to, I think her name was Lainey, the young girl who's been experiencing the crocata stuff. And Dean is like, oh yeah, go talk to Jailbait. And it's like, okay, Dean, not everybody's mind goes there. Like, calm down. But that's another instance of where I was like, it feels like he's saying these things by rote. Like he's not, like he's saying these things because that's the kind of stuff that Dean says.
And in that particular moment, he's also saying it because he's feeling defensive and frustrated that Sam's leaving at all. And so he's putting a dig at Sam for leaving.
Yeah. A lot of that toxicity really does come out when he's upset, like he is in this moment. And I think that that's interesting, given the individual who raised him.
Yeah, and the reverting, and what we talked about, like reverting back to old patterns, and Dean's toxic masculinity patterns largely do.
We could start a whole podcast about just that phrase. Dean's toxic masculinity patterns could be a whole thing.
Yeah, and they do come from a lot of the ways that John presented.
Yeah, they come from a lot of trauma.
And those impact, if nothing else, those impacts show up in this episode.
So now it's time for our episode Mixtape, in which each of our hosts provides a song that they feel like either embodies the episode or, a vibe from the episode or like something about it. So I'll go first. My episode Mixtape contribution is super cheesy and on the nose for being supernatural, but we're going to go with it anyway. I am going to go with Dust in the Wind by Kansas for this episode, because I feel like some of the lyrics in that really are reminiscent of Dean's feeling of hopelessness at the end, because as much as he may have had a lot of problems with his father and a lot of toxic relationship qualities with him, at the end of the day, I think Dean just wants to be saved by his dad. He just wants that to be the solution to this. And I think he's really heartbroken that doesn't happen. And the opening lines of that song are only for a moment and the moment's gone. All my dreams pass before my eyes, a curiosity. And then it's just their dust in the wind. And I think that's very much how Dean's hopes feel this episode. So that's my suggestion.
I don't know how well the actual content of this works, but the entire time I was watching this episode, I kept thinking of the whole 2016 album by Lemon Demon called Spirit Phone. And specifically the song Touchtone Telephone.
Nice.
And I think Touchtone Telephone might be similar in vibe, but can't confirm. I just, it was too good. I couldn't pick anything else.
That's great.
That's very good. That's very good. Okay, for my song, I don't think I've used this before. It is possible that I have. So I'm going to go with Haunt by Bastille.
Love a good Bastille reference.
The chorus is, I'll come back to haunt you. Memories will taunt you. I will try to love you. It's not like I'm above you. And I was thinking about the dynamic between Dean and Sam in this episode and our conversation about that role reversal, but also about the idea of John kind of still hovering over them, haunting them, and influencing the way that they communicate with each other. And I love a good Bastille song. So takes me back to my Tumblr days. So that's going to bring us to our last segment of the week, which is our blessings. This is the part of the show where we choose a character, we bless them for an action they've taken or something they're going through or a way we want to think charitably of them. So Elayna, do you want to start? Who do you want to bless this week?
Sure. For reasons as just mentioned in my episode Mixtape suggestion, I would like to bless Dean this episode, and specifically like the hope that he loses. I think this really feels like a very low blow at when they're at a point where like they're reaching critical mass here. There is not a lot of time left and they're still unable to figure out how to solve this problem and to keep him alive. And I think that because of that, he was so invested in John being real in this episode that to find out he's not is just I think, a really heartbreaking experience for him. And I think it's also shown in one of my favorite things about this episode, even though it's not like one of my favorites as an episode as a whole, is the moment at the very end when, you know, Dean kind of just makes that little joke about, like you say, and me, like, and then he just hands him a beer and they just watch some TV. And it feels very much like Dean has no hope in anything else, but he always has hope in his relationship with Sam. And so in that moment when he's losing it, I feel like he grasps onto that brotherly moment, and it's really beautiful. So that is my blessing is for Dean this week because of those reasons.
Lovely. Thank you. Jessy.
I would like to bless Lainey, the girl
good.
in this episode, because she had what is rarely exhibited, specifically by the women in Supernatural. She had a lick of sense. And when encountered with the ghost, the ghost, quotation marks, not only did she just unplug the computer, remove herself from that situation, instead of doing literally anything else, she called somebody who could help and removed herself from the situation and the danger like a reasonable human being. And bless her for that.
Yes.
I appreciate Lainey.
This teenage child has more sense than most people on the show.
And Winchester put together.
I'm really glad you blessed her, because I was going back and forth between blessing her and blessing Sam. So that means I will bless Sam. Yes. And I'm going to specifically bless Sam for his level-headedness in this episode.
Yes.
He's obviously frustrated with Dean, very understandably so, but he also walks the line of like still being kind about it. And I was thinking about, particularly when they do find out it's not John, he's very compassionate to Dean about that, because he knows how much it being John meant to Dean. And he doesn't even though he's right, he doesn't rub it in a way that like makes Dean feel worse. And I think, you know, it's easy to be right and then be a little bit like, but I need to make sure you know that like, not only was I right, but like I was right. And I think that Sam's very kind in this episode to Dean. So yeah, a blessing for being kind when someone's really pissing you off. And you are right. Yeah.
Love that.
So any final thoughts from either of you on this episode that you would like to say?
This was a delight, as always.
Yeah, I did forget that I had, and literally I'm so annoying with these, but I have a prop related to the pop culture stuff that I want to talk about all the time, which is this. So this is a book from 1908 that is, and you can cut this out because I know it's visual, but I just wanted to show you guys. So this is a book from 1908 that is a satanic panic book about how telephones will be able to, the devil will talk to you through the line of the telephone.
That's amazing.
Yes. And I was sitting here and I brought it out so I could show you guys, and I looked over and I was like,
the fact that you have that is phenomenal.
I found it in on Facebook Marketplace. Somebody was donating or not donating. They were selling like, here's a bag full of old books, take them or leave them. And I saw just the devil's doings and was like, okay, I will spend $35 on this giant bag of books just to get this one book. And it did not disappoint.
That is such a cool artifact. And we will have pictures of it that will be linked in the episode description, so you can see just what this amazing satanic panic book is. It's so cool.
We love a good satanic panic on saving people queering things.
Well, that is it for our episode today. Thank you, Elayna and Jessy. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Yes,
absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Yes.
It's so much fun.
Oh, you'll be back. You'll be back.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So make sure you are subscribed to Saving People Queering Things wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can find links to our social media and how to reach out to us through our website, which as always is queeringthingspodcast.com. Be sure to ride along with us next week for season 3, episode 15, Time is on My Side, through the theme of heritage.
Thank you all for coming along for the ride, and we wish you a peaceful road until we meet again.